In the last episode, we had the Jeep out on the in the back alleyway, and one of the scary things that I did with that was I had this temporary gas tank in here, and what I think I'm going to do before I start doing the wiring, I believe I'm going to restore the original gas tank and do some testing on it to see if the float is still good and if the sending unit is working, and also have some old paint that I found over at my parents'. Let me show you. So here's the old gas tank, and it's really not in bad shape. I mean, it's got a little bit of surface rust on it there, a little dirty, typical stuff. But and I have a new neck rubber seal to go on here. But what we're going to end up doing then is removing the float, doing a test to make sure that the sending unit is still good, and also to make sure that the float isn't leaking. So I have no idea if the gauge in the Jeep works, but at least I want to get this side of the system working. The paint that I want to use for this is what I found. It's probably about 35 years old, been sitting over at my parents' house. Anybody that's been around for quite some time and maybe worked in a body shop back in the day probably knows DuPont Centauri's. Was kind of like the go-to glossy black back in the day before all the clear coats. So it sounds liquid in there, so I'm hoping that it's still good, and that's what I want to use on this tank. What I want to do is check for resistance here. Not sure what it should be, but I should at least see some sort of movement. So I have it set at the smallest amount of resistance I have on ohms of 200. My lead there. Should be able to ground it up in here. I probably can't see that. Unless I'm getting a bad ground, I'm not getting anything here. Yeah, so there's nothing wrong with the settings here. I'm just not getting anything out of this. I was just looking at this, and these are just bent over tabs, so I think I'm going to open it up. We're going to take a look and see what's inside of this. Yeah, that would be why it doesn't work. Yep. I would say that that's no good. But I need to order a new sending unit. Since that's not working and I don't have a replacement piece right now, I'm just going to put this back in so that way I can finish cleaning the tank and get some fresh paint on it. And I figure at least I can put it in, use it. I can always pull the seat back out and swap this out with the new unit when it comes in. So I took the tank and I washed it with some Scotch-Brite, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make replacement straps here that, well, I shouldn't say straps, these are little dividers that were underneath the tank, and they're rubber. So I had actually saved an inner tube that came out of an old tire, so I'm just going to cut pieces of that out of this. One more. Really anxious to open this can up and see if this is any good. So here we go. Now before I open that, I'm going to try and scrape away some of this broken up stuff so it doesn't end up down in there. Although I will have to run this through a fine screen funnel into my paint gun. But if I can keep chunks out of it, I'm going to do that. Oh, that looks good. Got a little layer down on there on the bottom. So I got a feeling this is thinned. I'll have to see if that layer will blend. I don't know. It's feeling kind of rubbery. I mean, after all, this paint is 30 years old. Been stirring this for about 15 minutes here now, and there's just no saving this. It's pretty bad. It's a shame. I really always like this in tarry black. So since I couldn't use the paint that I really wanted to, I wound up just using the aerosol cans. Here I'm just placing the primer, and I didn't wind up videotaping the black that I put on there, but it was just a general spray bomb. At this point, decided I'm going to go ahead and remove the seat and do a test fit with the tank. So here I've painted the bare metal spots with some paint to protect that. Put down the rubber strips that I had made, and put the tank in to stay at this point. Drilled a hole in the new bed floor to bolt down that strap, and here I'm just installing the seat. Now at this point I'm under the Jeep, and I have a universal fuel line. It's about 3 foot in length, and I'm just making a register mark where I'm going to bend this so it'll follow the inside of the frame rail. Using a bending tool, I'm attempting to start to make the bend in this fuel line. And I'm curious how many people will notice what's wrong with this video, other than the fact that I'm using a cheap Harbor Freight tool. There's something else that's a real problem here. If you notice the very end there where it's flared, there should be something there. Of course, after I bent this about 3/4 of the way, that's when I realized I did not have a flare nut at that end. Well, I wound up using the other end and put the nut where it belonged and made my bend, and as you can see here, I think it came out pretty well and matches the original pretty well. This bend is to bring the line into the inside of the frame rail, and then the next bend that I'll end up doing will be to bring it out of the frame rail so it can clear the master cylinder and then turn upwards to the fuel pump. I really would like to replace that tube bender. It's really not that good, but as you can see, the finished product actually doesn't look half bad. Installing the line wasn't too hard, just had to finagle it a little bit to convince it to go into a couple areas, but in the end, I was pretty happy with its fitment. With it installed, you can see it follows the frame rail, clears the clutch linkage around the master cylinder, and then bends and follows up to the fuel pump. Marking the fuel line where I'm going to install the fuel filter, and for those that are paying attention, that's the other end of the fuel line where I started to make that bend and didn't have the flare nut at the right spot, so there it's stuck where the bend started. So I'm cutting that free, and then this will be at the proper length so that I can install the fuel filter and make the final connection to the fuel pump. Next time, I'm going to be installing the new wiring. I have a kit from Easy Wire, so we're going to go through that kit, see what's all included, and see how easy it is to fit it to a Jeep. Have new tail lights, get the headlights working, turn signals and the like, so I can actually get this Jeep out on the road. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe. You can follow us on Instagram. Hit the like button and don't forget to comment. Thank you for watching.